They all laughed at my empty womb, raised their glasses in a cruel mock toast while my husband sat silent beside me. They never imagined I'd be the one laughing last, as they weep over their empty bank accounts, shattered reputations, and broken family bonds. My name is Naomi, and this is my story. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who should protect you most, the ones who promise to love you through sickness and health, through good times and bad? The family who claimed to welcome you with open arms, only to stab you in the back when you were at your most vulnerable. That's what happened to me at the Clarke family reunion. My infertility became their favourite joke, their cruel entertainment for the evening. Little did they know, their laughter would echo back to them through empty mansion hallways, courtroom corridors, and the whispers of scandalized social circles. In just 18 months, I systematically dismantled their prestigious family, their wealth, their status, their precious reputation, all while creating the family I truly deserved. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's my masterclass in patience, precision, and the power of a woman scorned. Some lessons are taught with kindness. Others are carved into your soul with the same knife you used to wound someone else. I was once the girl who had it all, at least on paper. By 34, I'd climbed to senior marketing director at one of Boston's top firms, with a corner office overlooking the harbour. I married Thomas Clarke, heir to Clarke Development Corporation, in what the society pages called the wedding of the season. We bought a beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill, travelled to 6 continents, and built what I thought was the perfect life. But beneath that glossy exterior was a woman desperate to become a mother. I'd wanted children since I was young, had names picked out since college. Thomas and I agreed to start trying on our 2nd anniversary. I never imagined it would become a 5-year nightmare. Thomas, my husband, the man I fell in love with for his gentle smile and intellectual conversations. The book-loving architect who'd rather sketch buildings than attend his family's pretentious galas. But Thomas had a fatal flaw. A spine made of jelly when it came to standing up to his parents, especially his mother. "They're just old-fashioned, Naomi," he'd say after every cutting comment from Barbara. "Mother doesn't mean anything by it." 5 years of excuses while he sat silent during their subtle and not-so-subtle attacks. Barbara Clarke was the quintessential Boston Brahmin, chairwoman of 3 charity boards, always dressed in tailored St. John's suits with her signature pearl necklace. Her silver hair never had a strand out of place, just like her carefully curated public image. But behind closed doors, Barbara was a manipulative tyrant who measured people's worth by their bloodline and ability to advance the Clarke legacy. "The Clarke name has been respected in Boston for 7 generations," she'd remind me constantly, as if my own family's accomplishments were irrelevant without the proper pedigree. Richard Clarke, my father-in-law, was the business genius behind Clarke Development's expansion from residential real estate to a commercial empire. His boardroom brilliance was legendary, but he was largely absent from family matters unless they affected the company. His handsome weathered face appeared more often in business magazines than at family dinners. What Barbara controlled with emotional manipulation, Richard controlled with money. The Clarke family business was Boston royalty, the kind featured in glossy profiles about America's business dynasties. Their charitable foundation funded hospital wings and university buildings. Their annual Christmas party was the social event of the season. Politicians, celebrities, and business leaders all wanted the Clarke stamp of approval. And then there was my infertility journey. God, it's still painful to talk about. 3 years of negative pregnancy tests, countless hormone injections that turned me into an emotional wreck, 2 rounds of failed IVF, 3 miscarriages, the last one at 14 weeks when we thought we were finally safe. Each loss carved something out of me. After the 3rd miscarriage, I took a leave of absence from work. I spent days in bed while Thomas retreated to his office. The doctors ran tests and found issues that made natural conception difficult, but not impossible. That slim hope kept me going through more treatments, more disappointments, more silent tears in bathroom stalls. Through it all, Barbara's comments grew more pointed. Perhaps you're too focused on your career. Clarke women have never had these problems. Thomas's cousin Margot just had her fourth, you know. Little barbs that bled me slowly, all while maintaining her perfect grandmother-in-waiting facade. The annual Clarke family reunion was held every July at the family estate in Manchester by the Sea. A sprawling oceanfront property with manicured gardens, a private beach, and a main house that had graced the pages of Architectural Digest twice. It was a 3-day affair of competitive tennis matches, sailing, and formal dinners where the extended Clarke clan gathered to celebrate their collective success and scrutinise any perceived failures. That year marked my 5th reunion. The previous 4 had been increasingly difficult as my childless status became more conspicuous. But I'd perfected the art of deflection. When Aunt Catherine asked about family plans, I'd redirect with questions about her grandchildren. When Cousin Philip's wife paraded their newborn twins, I'd compliment their adorable outfits, then excuse myself to refill my drink. The main event was always Saturday night's formal dinner. 62 family members seated at tables in the grand ballroom, with Richard and Barbara presiding at the head table, where Thomas and I sat alongside his brother Maxwell and his perfectly fertile wife Diane with their 3 children. I wore a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Conservative enough for Barbara's approval, but elegant enough to feel confident. Thomas wore his standard reunion uniform. Khakis, blue blazer, family crest tie. We looked like the perfect couple. No one would have guessed we'd barely spoken all week after our latest fertility treatment failed. Dinner progressed as it always did. 5 courses of gourmet food accompanied by passive-aggressive conversation. I was pushing around my roasted duck when Barbara stood, crystal champagne flute in hand. Traditionally, Richard gave the family toast, but Barbara had that look in her eye, the one that appeared when she was about to assert dominance. "Family," she began, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Another blessed year for the Clarkes. Maxwell's promotion, Diane's wonderful volunteer work with the symphony, and their beautiful children excelling in every endeavour. She paused, turning slightly toward me, lips curved in what some might mistake for a smile. I felt a chill despite the warm July evening. And Thomas continues to make us proud with his work at the firm. His latest development project in the Seaport District is set to break ground next month. Another pause. Longer. Deliberate. If only he had someone by his side who understood what family truly means. Someone who could give him children to continue the Clarke legacy. The room fell silent. Several relatives looked down at their plates. But instead, Barbara continued, raising her glass higher, we have our dear Naomi, who seems more concerned with boardroom presentations than nursery preparations. To our barren daughter-in-law, may she someday understand what truly matters in life. A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Uncle Walter, already drunk, guffawed loudly. Cousin Philip smirked. Most looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Absolutely nothing. And Thomas? My husband. My supposed partner. He stared at his plate, slightly flushed but silent, completely, devastatingly silent. In that moment, something crystallized inside me. A clarity I'd never experienced before. I felt strangely calm as I looked at these people. This family that had never truly accepted me. This husband who would never truly defend me. I smiled, raised my water glass, no alcohol during fertility treatments, and took a small sip while maintaining eye contact with Barbara. Her momentary confusion at my lack of tears was the only satisfaction I received that night. Later, lying awake in the guest bedroom while Thomas snored in the master suite, I made 3 decisions with absolute certainty. First, I would divorce Thomas, not immediately, but strategically when it would cause maximum damage. Second, I would systematically dismantle the Clarke Development Corporation from the inside out. 5 years as a marketing executive had taught me how reputations were built and how quickly they could be destroyed. Third, I would expose every dirty family secret I'd uncovered during my years of silent observation at these gatherings. The affairs, the financial improprieties, the illegal business dealings. I knew where all the bodies were buried because no one bothered to guard their conversations around the invisible, childless woman. As dawn broke over the Atlantic, I watched the waves crash against the sea wall and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. They had taken my dignity. Now I would take everything they valued. They say the best revenge takes planning. Mine took 3 months of meticulous preparation while I maintained the perfect facade of a dutiful Clarke wife. The Monday after the reunion, I returned to work with a new smile, one that made my assistant Zoe ask if I had done something different. What I'd done was make peace with destroying the people who had humiliated me. But outwardly, I was the same Naomi. I still prepared Thomas's favourite meals on Sundays, still attended Barbara's charity luncheons, still discussed renovation plans for our future nursery. Meanwhile, I became a ghost in the Clarke company servers. Thomas's password had been the same for years. Our wedding anniversary, plus his childhood dog's name. Amateur. Through his login, I discovered financial reports never shared with investors, emails discussing questionable land acquisitions, and Richard's private correspondence with offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I scheduled a women's wellness retreat that was actually 3 days of consultations with Boston's most ruthless divorce attorney, Vivian Harding. Known for representing high-profile wives, Vivian listened to my story without emotion, then laid out a strategy that would protect my assets while maximizing my settlement. "The timing will be crucial," she explained. "We document everything now but file when it causes maximum damage." Her retainer was steep, but I paid it from a separate account I'd been building for years. My just-in-case fund that Thomas knew nothing about. Financial advisors helped me secure my own investments. IT specialists taught me how to extract and store digital evidence without leaving traces. I purchased an encrypted laptop that never connected to our home network. Every night after Thomas fell asleep, I documented, downloaded, and built my case. The hardest part was building a support network separate from the Clarks. Their social tendrils reached throughout Boston's elite circles. I reached out to old college friends I'd neglected during my marriage, reconnected with former colleagues, joined a support group for women dealing with infertility. The only place I allowed myself authentic emotion. There I met Renata, a brilliant attorney who'd been through 3 IVF cycles and understood my pain without judgment. When I vaguely mentioned family problems, she invited me to dinner and introduced me to her circle. Accomplished women who had built success without famous last names or family fortunes. "Your in-laws sound like narcissists," Renata said one evening after I shared a sanitized version of Barbara's behavior. Classic generational wealth toxicity. By day 60, I had compiled evidence of tax evasion, workplace harassment complaints that Richard had buried, and proof that Barbara had been embezzling from her own charity for years, siphoning donations meant for children's cancer research into her personal art collection. By day 75, I had created 3 separate anonymous email accounts and drafted detailed documents outlining each family transgression, ready to send to regulatory agencies, business partners, and society columnists. By day 90, I had secured a new apartment lease under an LLC name, transferred my most treasured possessions to a storage unit, and prepared divorce papers with Vivian to be filed at the perfect moment. But I knew revenge is a dish best served with receipts. During those 3 months, I collected every shred of evidence, every nasty email from Barbara about me. Every time Thomas dismissed my feelings in writing, every questionable business transaction, bank statements, tax forms, recorded conversations at family events where they didn't realize my phone was capturing their true nature. They thought they were hunting a wounded deer. They never realized they were being stalked by a wolf. They say timing is everything. In revenge, this couldn't be more true. I launched Phase 1 on the morning of the Clarke Family Foundation's annual gala, their most prestigious charity event of the year. Barbara had spent months planning it, securing the governor's attendance and convincing a famous Broadway star to perform. Tickets cost $10,000 per plate, with all proceeds supposedly benefiting children's cancer research. At 6 a.m., I sent meticulously documented evidence of Barbara's embezzlement to 3 entities simultaneously: the Attorney General's office, the Boston Globe's investigative team, and the Foundation's board of directors. The evidence was irrefutable. 5 years of financial records showing how Barbara had diverted nearly $2.3 million meant for medical equipment and research grants into purchasing rare artwork and renovating the Clark's vacation home in the Berkshires. The first call came at 8:17 a.m. Thomas's phone, Barbara hysterical on the other end. I pretended to be asleep while he rushed to dress, listening to his side of the conversation. There must be some mistake. Who would do this? Of course we'll figure it out. By noon, the gala was cancelled. By evening, it was the lead story on local news. Barbara Clarke, Boston's philanthropic darling, under investigation for charity fraud. I watched from our living room as Thomas paced, fielding calls from panicked family members. When he asked if I had any idea who might have exposed his mother, I simply shrugged and suggested someone from the accounting department must have discovered the discrepancies. The family circled wagons, emergency meetings, lawyers summoned, damage control initiated. For 3 weeks, the Clarks focused exclusively on protecting Barbara from prosecution, which is exactly when I launched Phase 2. Richard's affair with his executive assistant, Valerie, had been going on for 12 years. They maintained a condo in Back Bay, where they met 3 afternoons a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like clockwork. What Richard didn't know was that Valerie had been keeping receipts of her own. Hotel stays during business trips, gifts purchased on the company card, explicit emails sent from his company account. It took one lunch, one sympathetic ear, and one promise of financial security to convince Valerie to share everything with me. This time, I sent the evidence directly to Barbara and the Clarke Development Corporation board. The family had barely contained the charity scandal when this new crisis erupted. Richard, the family patriarch, exposed not just as an adulterer, but as someone who had misused company funds to maintain his mistress. The board called an emergency session. Barbara locked herself in their Beacon Hill mansion, refusing all visitors, including Thomas. The Clarke children took sides, some defending their father, others their mother. The unified family front shattered. And while they were distracted by these twin scandals, I initiated Phase 3. Thomas had been cutting corners on development projects for years, using substandard materials while charging premium prices, falsifying safety inspections, bribing city officials to overlook code violations. I had compiled a comprehensive dossier: dates, amounts, names, bank transfers, everything needed to prove fraud. I sent this information to the 3 largest investors in Clarke Development's newest project, a $300 million downtown high-rise that was weeks away from breaking ground. The investors pulled out immediately. The SEC launched an investigation. Construction halted. Contractors went unpaid. Lawsuits piled up. Clarke Development Corporation's stock plummeted 62% in a single day. The morning the stock collapsed, I filed for divorce. Thomas found the papers on our kitchen island next to a printed copy of all the evidence I had compiled against his mother, his father, and him. I wasn't home. I had already moved into my new apartment, transferred to our company's Chicago office, and left nothing behind but the destruction I had methodically orchestrated. "Why?" Thomas texted later that night. "Why would you destroy my family like this?" I sent one response: "Ask your mother about her toast." Within 6 months, Barbara was indicted on 32 counts of financial fraud and awaiting trial. Richard resigned as CEO and the board forced him to sell his shares at a fraction of their previous value. Thomas was named in multiple civil suits from investors, and had become unemployable in Boston's business community. The Clarke name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, now appeared in headlines alongside words like fraud, scandal, and corruption. Their social invitations dried up, their friends disappeared, their reputation, the thing they valued above all else, was irreparably destroyed. They had mocked my empty womb at a family dinner. I had emptied everything they held dear in return. 18 months can change everything. I watched the Clarke empire collapse from the comfort of my Chicago high-rise apartment, tracking their downfall through news alerts and the occasional text from mutual acquaintances. The family business declared bankruptcy after investors pulled out and lawsuits piled up. Their Beacon Hill properties were sold to cover legal fees. The Manchester estate, site of my humiliation, was seized by federal authorities as part of Barbara's embezzlement case. Richard accepted a plea deal, testifying against other executives to reduce his own sentence. He still served 14 months in a minimum security prison. The man who once commanded boardrooms now spent his days in a jumpsuit, playing checkers with white-collar criminals. Thomas avoided jail time but lost everything: his reputation, his inheritance, his social standing. Last I heard, he was working at an architectural firm in Seattle, starting over with a fraction of his former salary and none of his former connections. And Barbara? She received 5 years probation, community service, and a $5 million. Fine. The woman who once ruled Boston society became its cautionary tale. No more charity boards, no more gala invitations, no more deferential treatment at exclusive restaurants. But this story isn't just about their fall, it's about my rise. Chicago became my rebirth. Away from the Clarkes, away from the pressure to conceive, I rediscovered who I was. Not Thomas's wife, not Barbara's project, just Naomi. 6 months after the divorce, I made a decision that would have shocked my former self. I chose to become a single mother by choice, no more waiting for the perfect situation or the perfect partner. No more invasive fertility treatments. I selected a sperm donor with care, a literature professor with kind eyes and a family history of good health. The first embryo transfer worked. After years of heartbreak, my pregnancy progressed without complications. Each ultrasound revealed a strong heartbeat, each test came back normal. I decorated the nursery myself, joined a single mother's group, and prepared for a life I had always wanted, but almost lost hope of having. When Lila was born, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that already seemed to take in everything, I understood something profound. The Clarkes hadn't kept me from motherhood. In a twisted way, they had pushed me toward it, on my own terms. I built a chosen family in Chicago. Renata became Lila's godmother. My colleagues celebrated milestones with genuine joy. My neighbours brought meals and offered childcare when I returned to work. This was family, people who supported without conditions, who celebrated your happiness instead of undermining it. Then, 3 weeks after Lila's first birthday, an envelope arrived with a Massachusetts postmark. Inside was a handwritten letter on the monogrammed stationery Barbara had always used. "Dear Naomi," it began. The paper showed water stains, tears perhaps. "I write this letter knowing you may destroy it unread, and I would deserve nothing less." She continued for 3 pages, detailing her regrets, her shame, her recognition of the damage she had caused. The letter described her therapy sessions, her community service at a women's shelter, her estrangement from most of the family who blamed her for their collective downfall. "I will never ask your forgiveness," she wrote. "What I did is unforgivable. But I want you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. Not just my family's reputation, but a good woman's chance at happiness within our circle. I hope wherever you are, you have found the peace and family you deserve." She ended with news that she volunteered at an infertility support group, sharing her story as a cautionary tale of how not to treat those struggling to conceive. I held her letter beside Lila's crib, watching my daughter sleep peacefully. free from the toxic legacy that would have surrounded her in the Clarke family. A week later, I sent a single photograph in response. Lila and me at her birthday party, surrounded by smiling friends, a cake with one candle, and a life built on love rather than appearances. On the back, I wrote just one line. You taught me family means loyalty. I simply returned the lesson. People often ask if I regret what I did to the Clarks. They wonder if my revenge went too far, if destroying an entire family's legacy was proportionate to one cruel toast at a dinner party. But that toast wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of subtle cruelty, of a family culture that valued appearance over authenticity, legacy over love. It was the breaking point after watching my husband, the man who promised to stand by me, sit silent while his mother publicly mocked my deepest pain. Was it justified? I don't know if revenge is ever truly justified, but I do know that sometimes the people who hurt you most need to experience consequences before they can understand the damage they've done. The irony isn't lost on me that in losing the family I married into, I found the strength to create the family I truly wanted. By walking away from people who saw my infertility as a character flaw, I finally became a mother on my own terms. If there's anything to learn from my story, it's this. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. True family is built on respect, support, and unconditional acceptance. The people who celebrate your victories and hold you during your defeats, those are your real family, whether they share your DNA or not. I also learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away. For years, I tried to fit into the Clarke family mold, to earn their approval, to become the daughter-in-law Barbara wanted. All that effort never moved me an inch closer to acceptance. It was only when I stopped seeking their validation that I found my power. Lila is 3 now. She's curious, determined, and completely unaware of the family drama that preceded her birth. Someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her about the Clarks. Not to perpetuate bitterness, but to ensure she understands that no one, not even family, has the right to diminish her worth. I won't teach her to seek revenge, but I will teach her to set boundaries, to recognize toxic relationships, and to create her own definition of family based on love rather than obligation. The Clarks taught me that family can wound you deeper than any enemy. But in recovering from those wounds, I discovered something more valuable: the capacity to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. That's the true revenge. Not the satisfaction of watching them fall, but the joy of rising higher than I ever could have within their shadows.